Have you ever felt that your thoughts can sometimes be counterproductive, unrealistic, or just unhelpful? Maybe even hold you back from doing things that you actually want to do? Well, chances are you're probably experiencing some cognitive distortion. Now, what is a cognitive distortion? Well, cognitive or cognition refers to your thoughts or a way of thinking. And a distortion is something that is skewed or twisted or just warped from the norm or from what is perceived as normal. And so a cognitive distortion would be a way of thinking that is skewed, unrealistic, or irrational, right? And this pattern of thinking tends to then lead to negative thoughts or negative emotions. Now, it is important to note that experiencing a cognitive distortion is not necessarily or inherently an indication of a mental illness or mental disorder, right? Everyone at some point or another has a thought that can be classified as a cognitive distortion, right? So this isn't meant to be pathologizing in any way, but it's more so meant to raise awareness and help identify these types of thinking and find ways to challenge them and be able to maybe even overcome them with time. So, with that being said, let's look at our first cognitive distortion that we look at in this video today. So, the first type of thinking that we're going to look at is called black and white thinking, also known as all or nothing type thinking, or polarized thinking, right? So for the purpose of this video, we'll just refer to it as polarized thinking. So what is polarized thinking? Well, let's look at the definition. So black and white thinking, also known as all or nothing thinking or polarized thinking, is a cognitive distortion that involves seeing things in extreme categories such as success or failure, good or bad, right or wrong, without any shades of gray, without any nuance. Alright, so now that we know what polarized thinking is, let's look at some examples of this polarized thinking. It might be something like, I'm not good enough if I don't get the job. If a friend doesn't call me back within an hour, they don't care about me. I'm lazy if I don't exercise 5 days a week. I can't have both good grades and a social life. I'm weak if I can't stick to healthy eating 100% of the time. Now, so again, you're viewing the world or situation in an either or terminology instead of acknowledging the variability that each situation can bring. So some common terms that are kind of like signals that are indicative of, hey, this is probably polarized thinking that's being used here, are absolute terms such as always, never, or every, right? 9 times out of 10, when these terms are being used, it's probably not 100% valid, right? So when you find yourself using these terms, right, unless it actually applies to what you're saying, chances are you might be falling victim to this polarized thinking. Okay, so what are some ways that we can go about challenging this way of thinking? Well, avoid thinking in extremes, right? Don't choose either or extremes, and try to identify how to be more flexible, right? Seeing more the shades of gray, finding the middle ground. So one way you could think of this is ask yourself the question, where is this on the spectrum, right? If I have a gradient going from black to white, right? where on this gradient in the gray will this actually fall under? Because things aren't either totally white or totally black. There are always going to be, in some instances, shades of gray, right? So where is this on that gradient from black to white? Where are we on the gray scale? So here are some other questions you can ask to, again, avoid being on the poles of either all or nothing or black and white. Is this thought overly simplistic or extreme? Does the thought involve rigid should or must statements? Does the thought involve thinking in absolutes such as always or never? Is there no room for nuance or complexity in the thought? Does the thought involve jumping to conclusions without considering all the evidence? Are there other possible explanations or perspectives that the thought may ignore? Does the thought involve personalizing or globalizing an event? Does the thought involve catastrophizing or minimizing the situation? And we'll kind of talk about minimalization and catastrophization in a different video. But does the thought involve discounting the positive and exaggerating the negative? This is yet another cognitive distortion that we'll talk about in a future video. Does the thought involve focusing on one aspect of the situation and ignoring the others? Does the thought involve making assumptions without verifying the facts? Does the thought involve overgeneralizing from one negative experience? Again, overgeneralization being another cognitive distortion that we'll get to in a future video. Do my thoughts lead me to idealize and devalue others? Does my fixed mindset prevent me from learning and achieving my full potential? Do my thoughts limit opportunities and hinder collaboration or progress? Right, these are just some questions that, again, can kind of help you break out of that black and white, all or nothing thinking style and really start to identify what some of the nuance might be, what some of those gray areas might be. Okay, so now let's try to apply some of what we learned here to see if we can reframe some of these polarized thoughts into ones that can be a bit more helpful or at least more realistic. So the statement was, if a friend doesn't call me back within an hour, they don't care about me. Right? So what is the black and white thinking here? Well, it's either A, the friend cares about me, or B, the friend doesn't care about me. Right? That's the black and white thinking here. Okay? And so, how do we poke holes in this way of thinking? Well, the event here, I guess you can say, is whether or not they call me back, right? If the friend doesn't call me back, then that means that they don't like me or they don't care about me. If the friend does call me back, then that means that they do like me or they do care about me. Now, if we think about it, what other reasons might be present that may lead to someone not calling you, right? Or maybe you think about it from the perspective of, how do I know they do care about me, right? Is there other instances within the friendship that indicate to me that this person does care about me? And why am I allowing this one instance or this one thing to invalidate all those other instances? So a reframed thought might be something like, there are many other reasons my friend might not be able to call me back right now, and I don't know for sure if it relates to how much they care. And that statement allows for the nuance of, even if they don't call me back, it doesn't mean they don't like me. It allows for there to be other reasons at play other than just whether or not they care about you or not. And it also saves you from prematurely adopting this idea that your friend doesn't care about you without any real verifiable evidence to suggest that. Right? So again, we're kind of peeling back the layer behind the thoughts and trying to come to a more reframed and realistic thought at the end of it. Alright, so hopefully this video was helpful in defining polarized thinking, providing some examples of what it looks like, and providing some ways we can overcome or reframe those ways of thinking. And although I am a therapist, I'm not your therapist. So definitely if looking for mental health services, reach out to a clinician that is working in your area that can personally help you along your mental wellness journey. And as always, all the best.